As you know, this week and the coming week will be Discover Islam Week, where we'll be having stalls and a number of talks regarding Islam, and most of our events that we'll be having will be aimed at non-Muslims. So stuff like atheism, there's science to atheism, things about misconceptions about Islam, women in Islam. Not only is it good for non-Muslims, even though it's targeted at non-Muslims, it's good for us to be attending these events so that we are knowledgeable with regard to the answers that non-Muslims will ask us. A lot of times when at university, or even when we graduate and we're at work, we may be asked questions about Islam. What is Islam's view on this, or why in Islam does Muslims want to do this? And in order to answer these questions, we must be equipped prior to that on how to answer them. So inshallah, with these 2 weeks, we hope to kind of equip you with some basic skills, some basic ways and some methods as well to discuss with non-Muslims on how to answer these questions. And also just to remember, not only is it that we're supposed to be waiting for non-Muslims to ask us questions, as Muslims we're supposed to be actively going out and inviting to Islam. So as you know, we have the stalls in SU this week, so we had our first stall today, and we've got another stall today and a couple more stalls next week. It's an active duty of us to be inviting to Islam. So inshallah, messages will be going out where you can sign up and put your names down for the times you can attend the stalls and volunteer to give leaflets out, and so you can kind of play your bit in calling to Islam. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Brother Humza to begin today's talk. Jazakumullah khair.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're all well, hope you're all good. Apologies for my late arrival, I was a bit busy. The title of the talk today is called Paradigm Shift, and before we begin, I just want to open it up onto the audience. This is going to be an interactive type of workshop. What do we mean by paradigm shift? Does anyone have an understanding or idea what the word paradigm shift actually means? No one, that's it. So we just came to the talk, don't know what it means. Okay, so paradigm shift basically means a sort of alternate or change in perspective in sort of viewing something. So in this context, we're talking about Discover Islam Week, we're talking about specific questions that are raised against Islam, against theology, against the oneness of Allah, for example. And when we say paradigm shift, we mean what is this sort of change or alternative way that we can view these questions or answer these questions. And inshallah, this is the sort of topic that we're going to delve on today. So just a quick raise of hands. Who came to the talk last year where we talked about morality? It's called Flimsy Foundations. I just want to know how many people from the audience came. So a few of you. So if you remember, we touched a lot about emotion and morals. And I promised at the end of the talk that there will be a follow-up talk to that. And we're going to talk about these sort of logical arguments against the existence of Allah. So today's focus is on logic, and when we sort of assess atheism, we assess the sort of questions that are posed towards us against Islam, we can generally, in a general sense, we can sort of categorize them into two categories. One being the emotional, moral arguments, questions like why is Sharia law, for example, so barbaric? What the marriage of Aisha radiallahu anha, for example. Also, we have the logical side of things. Why do you believe in a God? Can you prove to me that the Prophet ﷺ is the last and final messenger? Can you prove to me that Islam is the correct religion? So generally, we can divide them into two subcategories. And today, we're going to focus on logic and the sort of alternative approach of answering those sort of questions. But before we go on to that, I just want a volunteer from the audience to come down. Anyone from the audience at all? Otherwise, I'm going to pick on someone. No. You can just stand over there. So the first question that we're going to discuss today is, why do you believe in God? Now, this question is understandably a very important question that each and every one of us in our lives is going to face in some way, shape or form. Whether that be ourselves trying to understand our deen and why we believe in Allah, whether that be a close friend of ours who's sort of not sure about their faith and wondering if they should actually leave Islam, questioning things about, does a God even exist? Or whether that be during the stalls in, for example, Discover Islam Week, when an atheist and agnostic comes forward to us and that says, why do you believe in the things that you do? Why do you believe in a God? Now, this question I'm going to ask Abdul Rahman to hopefully answer for us. But before we do so, we're just going to show a short clip that I want all of you to watch and try to take note of what's being said.
Do you believe in God?
Me?
Creator?
Yeah, so I'm, the more I look at the universe, just the less convinced I am that there is something benevolent going on. So if your concept of a creator is someone who's all powerful and all good, that's not an uncommon pairing of powers that you might describe to a creator. All powerful and all good. And I look at disasters that afflict Earth and life on Earth: volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, disease, pestilence, congenital birth defects. You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on Earth by natural causes. And I just ask, how do you deal with it? So philosophers rose up and said, if there is a God, God is either not all powerful or not all good. I have no problem if, as we probe the origins of things, we bump up into the bearded man. If that shows up, we're good to go. Okay? Not a problem. There's just no evidence of it. And this is why religions are called faiths, collectively. Because you believe something in the absence of evidence. That's what it is. That's why it's called faith. Otherwise, we would call all religions evidence. But we don't, for exactly that reason. So I'm given what everyone described to be the properties that would be expressed by an all-powerful being in the gods that they worship. I look for that in the universe and I don't find it. So I remain unconvinced. But if you've got some good evidence, bring it, bring it up, bring it, okay? And so I don't lead with that information because what I believe should be irrelevant to anyone. It's not about me. It's about the real world.
Okay, so we have here a famous physicist who's put forward what he believes when he was asked, do you believe in a God? Just before we speak to Abdul Rahman, I just want sort of general ideas. When we watch that, what are we thinking? There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to know what we're thinking when we see something like that. It's supposed to be interactive, actually. Okay, on the summit.
Yeah, it's a pretty typical way of thinking about it. But from what he said, it's pretty subjective. When he talks about all good or powerful, or he talks about all good, who is it to judge what's good for someone who's bad for someone at the end of the day? That's why we follow this religion, because it's subjective, it's not objective.
Very good. Is anyone else?
So he said that he hasn't found evidence that there's a God. But why does that have to be the question? Has he found evidence that there is no God?
Okay, that's a very, very important question. That. Latif?
To me, it just feels like he's assuming no afterlife, and from that he's able to conclude that God is either not all good or not all powerful.
Okay.
If there is an afterlife where there's a judgment, then we can be both at the same time.
Okay, so three important points there. So the first one is subjective good and bad. The second point is why are we asking for, why is this sort of claim put on theists? Why do we have to be the ones that have to prove evidence? Why can't they disprove God? And the third point was that why can't there be a hereafter where it would make sense for him to be omnibenevolent and omnipotent? Do any sisters have any sort of contributions at all before we move on? No? Okay, cool. So Abdul Rahman, come forward. So a guy has just come forward and he's just said exactly what he said there. He's having all these contentions against God, and then he asks you, why do you believe in God? What would you say?
I would just say it's what I believe it's right logically and subconsciously.
So prove to me why it's logical to believe in God. So imagine you're at DRW, Discover Islam Week, someone comes up to your store, they're really interested in Islam, they're really interested in God, but they want to know, they want proof, they want logical proof. What would you say to them? Why do you yourself do
I mean, my reason would not be something I would be able to articulate, so I'd probably look for something simpler. I would just, I'm not sure to be honest, I never thought about it.
Okay, is anyone able to help Abdul Rahman now? It's a difficult question, it's not very simple. Brother at the back.
Yeah, if you think about simple things, it doesn't exist by itself, someone make it. And if you think about complicated things like human and earth, sky, it will be like, it is creator for.
That's a very, very good argument put forward. So if anyone didn't hear what he said, is that when we think about simple things, the simple things would be like a watch or a phone. We don't say that they just came into existence randomly. We say that there must have been something that created that watch or phone. So then if we can believe that there's a creator for that, then why isn't there a creator, for example, when we talk about the heavens and the earth and the universe, which is a lot more intricate and a lot more complicated? Does anyone else have any other points they want to put forward?
Could you say like universal and legislative science? So you could say, for example, universal science, you can say things like the point that my brother just mentioned, like the earth, the heavens, the complexity of their design suggests that the one that designed them or created them had knowledge and power, etc., etc. And you could talk about in regards to legislative evidences. So, for example, the Quran, how that must have been from an objective perspective from God and an all divine being that had all knowledge, all power, and you can go through like the different parts of the Quran and how it can really have been from God.
Okay, so that's an interesting point there, but so similar point to what the brothers at the back, also then backing that with the Quran itself, saying that it could have only been from Allah, it couldn't be from anyone else. And we'll come back to that later on in PowerPoint. Abdul Rahman, what do you think about the two arguments put forward? Would you use that in your Discover Islam Week? Behind the store, someone comes up to you, would you say that?
I could try, but I think I know the response, like the response people would give for the first one. They will say, how about God doesn't need a creator?
Okay.
And then, as in, I won't be able to answer it, so someone wants to help.
Okay, Abdul Rahman, you can sit down. Does anyone have any additional comments before we move on? Want to make any additional comments? No? Okay, so let's talk about the stuff that we already mentioned. The brother at the back said that we can use design as an argument. So everything seems designed, everything seems quite complicated. Does anybody, so Abdul Rahman said one thing, there's a creator of the universe, but then who created him? That was one contention brought forward. Does anyone have any other contentions brought forward at all? Is that the only one we can think of? Brothers there?
And I think the ideal way to counteract his opinion is that to bring that there is because he brought the idea that if God is all good, why there is earthquake, or there is birth defects, and all these the one that before us. To counteract that that opinion, maybe saying that because that is where the scientific and the research is going to be going forward. Because if there is no, everything is good, it's really perfect, but there is no scientific works going into that area, into that direction. So
Okay.
when there is a birth defect, cancer, AIDS, so human will tend to work harder, to work more into that direction to solve the problem.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what.
That's an interesting point. We're actually going to come back to that near the end. I've got a few contentions just from what the brothers at the back. So see if you can respond to some of these and see if you still hold to your argument of what you said. So one of the first things against this whole argument, so the argument in general is saying, for example, if you came onto a field, you saw a watch there at the field, and you'd assume that this watch had a watchmaker, someone actually created this watch. It couldn't have come together by random chance. Therefore, the universe, which is a lot more intricate, a lot more complicated, must have had someone that made the universe, because it couldn't have just come by random chance. Now there's two problems with that argument. Number one, the first problem is correlation versus causation. So I'll give you a simple example. If we say that over the last 100 years, the number of pirates has decreased, and also in the last 100 of years, sea levels have risen, there's a clear correlation there. As the pirates decrease, the sea levels rise. but can we make that causal link? Can we say that because of the pirates, the sea levels have risen? We can't. So what we see there is you need evidence to make the causal link. So like the brother said, it's a complicated thing, but for you to move from complication to a maker, you have to give the evidence for that. You showed correlation, but you not showed causation. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if we're going to use that analogy, we need to use the whole width and breadth of that analogy. So for example, if you come to a field and you see a watch, but you also see a phone, you're not going to say that the watch has a watchmaker and the phone was a watchmaker as well that made the phone. You'll say that the phone has a phone maker. So in the sense of the universe, why can't we have a sun maker, the earth maker, etc., etc.? Why is it only one creator when it comes to the universe? But when it comes to the watch and the phone, there's many different creators. Does anyone want to join in that discussion? No? Of us?
Logically, if there was more than one being that had all power, then there wouldn't be be able to make a functional universe, I think, because they'll be clashing between themselves.
Yeah, potentially. But what if it was unanimously agreed, like a consensus of powerful beings?
Then would they all be all powerful because the other person's got the same power?
That's true. That's true. That's another good point.
Could you say that the thing that differentiates different beings is their different wills? So if they all have the same will, in a way you could say that they're kind of the same being. Or like, if on the opposite hand that they had different wills, then it happens. Basically, wouldn't be able, not every one of them would be able to carry out their will. So one might have to compromise, one might have to
So a clash of conflict, basically.
Yeah.
Clash of interest. Okay, so that's very good. Now, the purpose of me, having a little argument with the brother there, having sort of rebuttal to what he said, not because the arguments I gave have any sort of weighting to them. They're very poor arguments within themselves anyway. But the reason I've said them is when someone comes up to you in Discover Islamic, when a friend comes up to you and says, why do you believe in God? And you give that argument, you need to understand everything that comes with it. You need to understand the background baggage that comes with it. You also need to understand the sort of rebuttals that person will come with. Because if you can't answer those questions, then you'll be standing there, unaware of what to do next when they come forward with that. So coming back to the title of the talk, so we said paradigm shift. Now the reason it's paradigm shift is we're not going to use these generic, normal arguments that we've been hearing all along. Like we've heard the watchmaker argument, we've heard the argument from causality that everything has a cause, therefore the universe has a cause. We're not going to use these sort of arguments. We're going to look at it from an alternative light. And if we go back to the video, I said right at the beginning that we can divide things into emotion and logical. And the physicist, what he said was he had an emotional problem. He goes, how can we have an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God? How can we have these moral things going on? And he also had a logical problem, which was, give me evidence. Religion is by nature a faith. So there is no evidence there. So there's two problems he had. And as Muslims, we need to understand how to answer both problems. Now, if you get anything out of this talk today, I want you to remember the point of faith in this. So what the physicist said is all religions are faiths. Okay? So I want you to remember that. Okay, so another little exercise. Who here, hands up, has heard of Muhammad Ali? Hands up. If you haven't heard of Muhammad Ali, then you know what you're doing. But okay, so who is Muhammad Ali? Quick. Who is boxer? Who here, hands up, has heard of Phil Taylor? And if you have, don't say who he is. Who's heard of him? A couple of people. So loads of people, majority everyone's heard of Muhammad Ali. Not many people have heard of Phil Taylor. Okay, so they're both sportsmen, right? Muhammad Ali and Phil Taylor are both sportsmen. Now, hands up if you believe Muhammad Ali is the greatest sportsman alive. Oh, well, ever. Greatest sportsman ever. Hands up. And have you heard of Phil Taylor?
I haven't heard of Phil Taylor.
Okay, do you want to come up? Okay, so we're going to have a little mini debate. Okay, so the motion of the debate is that Phil Taylor is the greatest sportsman ever. Okay, now you're in opposition. You're going to try and convince me and convince the audience that Muhammad Ali is the greatest sportsman ever, because that's what you believe. So I'll give you your chance to say what you're going to say, and then I'll respond. So why is Muhammad Ali the greatest sportsman ever?
Right, so I would put forward the argument into different structures. First would be the titles that he has. He held the World Heavyweight Championship for a number of years, multiple times, defeated a lot of people who had held it before him. So he has that record before him, talking about it. And second was that he had a faith, basically, about something where, because he used to be called Cassius Clay before it. And later he changed his name because he believed in something. And this idea that he had led to the persecution of a lot of people, and he abided by it. So a sportsman, for me, if someone is great, it's not just their physical capabilities, but it's also whether they can stand for what they can believe in it or not.
Okay, very good. That's actually a very good answer to that. Okay, so my rebuttal to that, right? Phil Taylor. I believe Phil Taylor is a much greater sportsman than Muhammad Ali would ever have been, because he's won 214 tournaments, 85 major titles, 16 world championships, 8 consecutive world championships from 95 to 2002, 14 consecutive finals from 94 to 2007, and he was nominated BBC Sports Personality of the Year in both 2006 and 2007. So that's my response. Now, hands up who believes from this argument that Phil Taylor is the greatest sportsman alive. Hands up. You guys are quite harsh. Okay. And who believes in Muhammad Ali? From just the argument, no prejudice, just the argument. So we haven't had a full hands up. So I'll ask the question again. Phil Taylor or Muhammad Ali? So Phil Taylor, if you believe Phil Taylor is the greatest sportsman, more is said. Okay, so a good number of people. And who believes Muhammad Ali was the greatest sportsman? Okay, cool. Thank you for that. You sit down. So before I sort of reveal identities, who believes here boxing is a sport? Who's going to agree with me and say boxing is a sport? Majority of people. Who agrees with me that darts is a sport?
Sorry?
Darts.
Because darts is a sport. Not that many people agree with that. Now we know that Muhammad Ali is a boxer. Phil Taylor is actually a darts player. So the problem we have here is we're having a discussion. So the whole point of this was I was having a discussion with the brother. So what was his name? Abi. So I was having a discussion with the brother saying that I believe Phil Taylor is the greatest sportsman. He believes Muhammad Ali is. But the thing is, some of us disagree that Phil Taylor was even a sportsman anyway. So is there even point in having that discussion, that initial discussion, if we don't have the more, the underlying discussion, which is what is a sportsman and what constitutes as the greatest sportsman? Does that make sense? Is everyone on the same page? So if we go back to the question, why do you believe in God? I want you to think a bit deeper. So the superficial question is why do you believe in God? But there are a lot of underlying questions that we haven't actually exposed yet before moving on. And they're a lot more pertinent than the question at hand. One more example before we move on. Again, who was here for the last year's talk? Because I'm going to give an example. Last year's